Okay. So, kind of like I talked about last week, this one is about caretakers. Now, one of the things about this is that, or rather, caretaking, I should say. Um, Yet again, kind of like with last week, talking about the offices and about how they work and different things like that. Everybody, every everybody in their respective offices, they all have a certain like caretaking desire or desire to be a caretaker in their own kind of way of doing it. But what we're specifically talking about is almost more like caregiving or personal care that they give. Because certain offices are just built for that. Like we talked last week about apostles and the way that, when they take somebody in, when they go run out and save somebody, they'll pull them in and they'll like, kind of integrate them into the community, but their their focus is on the community. See, they're bringing that person into the community, integrating them. And if that person won't fit in the community, that might actually be like something that stops them from rushing out to save the day. Whereas when we talk about caretakers, we're talking about people who they're gonna take that person and take them in. And we talked about this a little bit at the end when we talked about shepherds and the way they'll run out to save the day, kind of, but their focus is on caring for the individual. And that's a big deal here. Because the bulk of this message revolves around shepherds and teachers. Because out of all the offices, those two are the most inclined, like it's the most innate thing for them to take on people to take care of. They're your primary caretakers. And it's very different for how they do it as to like, the intent and even kind of like the motivation. Similar to like last week when we talked about evangelists and apostles and how like, on the whole front of going out and saving the day, evangelists are a lot more what's the word? They're a lot more prolific than apostles in like how many people they'll reach. While shepherds and teachers have a similar dynamic in like the number of people that they'll take care of. See, shepherds are more like the evangelists. They're able to reach a lot more people, help a lot more people, just do a lot more, just because of like their heart. When we talk about caretaking, caregiving, however you want to phrase it, I'll say caretaking just to like stop having to stop and specify this. Shepherds come at it from a heart of wanting to see people grow. See, the primary thing when we talk about shepherds and their heart cry, if you will, is that of they want to take care of people, they want to take care of things, they want to see growth happen. Think of like a gardener. The way that a gardener plants the seeds, but then they water them and they water them and they tend them and they keep an eye on them and they pull out all the weeds around them and they just do everything they can to protect them until they grow. And that's their primary thing. They want to see those plants grow into the fullest and strongest and best that they can be. And the heart of a shepherd is that. And they'll go farther. Like, they're your biggest protectors. Like, it's funny. If you... In my experience with shepherds, like, I was talking about kind of issue with confrontation last week, talking about evangelists and apostles, and how like they're the most confrontational. Whereas shepherds, I made some comments about how like they're less inclined to be confrontational. If they have an issue with you, they usually won't say anything to you. However, if they have an issue with somebody who's affecting you, totally different. Like they might go and address that entirely. Think of it in these terms: if you're bullying them, they're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They're not going to talk to you about it. They're just going to like take the bullying. But if they see you being bullied, they will tear that person to pieces. Just wreck that ass. And you're welcome for that, Heather. And that's kind of like it's this weird thing with them. And it comes from this thing of like, you know, when you're their person that they're taking care of, they're more afraid to lose you than they are to confront you. The fear that they're going to actually like not be able to be the person taking care of you anymore tends to supersede their need to confront problems. And now, mind you, like again, like I said so many times last week with the other message, I'm speaking in generalities here. I can think of at least one shepherd who is not like this, in terms of like they'll confront the issues, usually. But that's also not true across the board. In fact, if I take that one shepherd and compare them with the like dozen others who will never confront you about the problems they have with you, the scales are doing a little bit of this, you know. But that's their primary heart. They just to kind of like move forward, they want to take care of you. They want to take care of things. They want to see growth. And they're willing to go about as far as they need to in order to do that. And that's their heart. And they're going to just collect all these, like, I used the example of them, like, you know, when they come in to save the day, that they're collecting, like, pets. Or regardless of whether they're saving the day or not, they're collecting you like a pet. And it's that same kind of thing where, like, you know, they want to love you. Like, they're going to feed you and comb you and... I'm not going to go any further, because if I say pet you, one, Heather's going to start laughing, and two...
I wouldn't do that.
Anybody watching this is why I say not for kids on these videos, guys. Like... I jest. But to be serious, the reality of shepherds is that they do want to take care of and nurture and grow the people who they have in their lives. And, you know, even though I can give like 1,000 examples, because like I said during the Office series before, like, I've got a lot of wounds from shepherds. So it's easy for me to like slip into places of kind of being bitter in a way towards the kind of general character traits that you see in amongst them. And it's easy as a result to be blind to what their heart really is. So when we compare like the kind of like method, the kind of heart cry, and kind of what shepherds represent here, you know, versus teachers, and in the realm of being caretakers, they've got a crop and they're taking care of as many as possible. And that's how they function. Like they just take care of these individual people, and everything in them is about like seeing them grow. And it doesn't end, whenever that person moves on. They will still reach out. They'll still remember you. And they might still like reach out. You'll get a card from them. You'll get they might get a random phone call or text, because you're never off their radar. They always care about you. But there's also going to be like other people too. Teachers, on the other hand, have a slightly different mentality. It's more like teachers' primary, like, their heart cry. Their heart cry is that of one that wants to create order and structure. And oftentimes what that looks like is that they'll take care of people too, just like a shepherd. But it's different in that they're focused on almost like mentoring that individual. Like, they're not going to take as many people on at one time, but when they take somebody on, they're going to really take them on. Like, they're going to be in this sense, they're going to be like your ride or die. And I know I used that for the apostle last week. But, with teachers, I suppose a better way to put it is that they're going to be like your coach. They're going to take you on, and they're going to teach you and walk you through things and provide you the lessons as to why why things are the way they are. And that's especially true when we're talking about the church and the gospel. Teachers in general live to just know things about the Bible and about God, and they just absorb so much, and they just ball it up inside, and then they just have to share it. And if you're somebody who's brought underneath a teacher, a good teacher especially, they're going to have so much to just share with you and show you, and they're excited to do it. It gives them life. And when you're that chosen disciple, as it were, you're their person, okay? Like, everything in them is just dedicated to elevating you to their level. Like, they're going to provide you with everything that they can, every element of strength and truth and knowledge that they have and can offer. They're just going to pour that out on you and try to bring you up to that. But again, because it's such an involved thing, they're never going to be as prolific as your shepherds. Like, they're not taking care of a crop. They've got a student. They're the sensei, and you're the person learning like that unique brand of martial arts that they've got. And that's how it works for them. There might be a little group of them, but they can't really, that's a lot of energy to have to expend, in order to try to like raise up a lot of people. They always kind of have to go, just a few at a time, at most. And see, the thing about it is that we don't have to delve into some of the like stigmas and so on, because caretaking, when we talk about people taking care of other people, it's not really, there's no explanation to that. You don't have to sit here and, justify why shepherds do what they do in terms of taking care of people. There's no conflict there. At least not in the sense, not from in an obvious way. And it's also not something that we struggle to celebrate. You know, if we see somebody in the church who primarily dedicates their time to the care and maintenance of other people, we easily applaud that. You know, there's no need to justify that. So at the end of the day, like looking at these two offices and how they do what they do and why they do what they do, you know, it's easy to see the beauty of that and the importance of that. And to recognize that, you know, in order for the church to continue functioning and growing and for people to function and grow in that, they need people to take care of them, because a lot of us are coming in there hurt, broke, lost, confused. When you don't know God at all, and you never had any relationship with Jesus whatsoever, you never even had anybody. You know, a teacher's a beautiful thing, because they'll teach you everything that they've got. They'll pour out everything that they've got. And, you know, I do have to, like, specify, I will say good shepherd, good teacher, and that's not to say that any of them are, I mean, there are bad ones, obviously, but that's not to say that there's, like, a sliding scale in terms of, like, you know, this teacher from this group is bad because they misinterpret the gospel. They're not meaning to, you know? Like, unless you're going to, like, a Westboro Baptist church or something like that, where they willy-nilly just destroy the gospel and disregard Jesus' teachings as much as they can in order to continue their same, like, deluded and hateful kind of, system of belief, you know, we're not dealing with that, all right? Not in general. In general, we're dealing with people who honestly want to help. And that's their heart, and that's where they're coming from. And that's what we see with shepherds and or pastors, however you want to phrase it. Again, it comes down to your Thank you. Thank you. Your interpretation. That is the word that I needed. And now there's like 40 seconds of me giving a weird look into the camera because of that.
I saved the day.
You did. Anyway, I haven't slept yet. So, when we talk about this, again, like, it's such an easy thing to appreciate. And, you know, it's important for us to, like, maintain this place of appreciating these things. And, you know, it really is. See, sometimes I think that the church at large kind of forgets to show appreciation to those who are doing this work, because it's expected that we should all be doing that work. Some of the common idioms that you'll hear, you know, put out there is that we're all pastors to one another, or we're all the caretakers to each other, we're all the good shepherd, you know, all these different things. And that message is very inclusive, and it is true on some levels. It's just that it can also have an incidental risk of devaluing how some people are really built to do this. Like, not everyone is built to really, like, pour out, you know, anything and everything that they are for the sake of another person's learning and development. Not everybody's built to deal with the tediums or the frustrations or the the neediness of a lot of people at one time as they just struggle to function and do. Shepherds and teachers are. And it's important, like, I'm going to take a minute to kind of like do a little blurb, kind of like last week, because the caretaking thing, having kind of like outlined how the different ones work there's also the side of this where we can talk about prophets for a minute. See, there are kind of two types of prophets, okay? There are, and there might be more, but when we talk about prophets, they kind of have two different schools of thought. We have what I like to refer to as our hardcore prophets and our shepherd prophets. Your hardcore prophet, and both of them are a direct representation of their experiences with God. Because in both cases, again, like I talked about in the original Office series about prophets, they really don't come into their own until they've had a firm experience with God. That's when they really come to life and start becoming just their own force of nature. But see, the thing about it is that with prophets, as they develop in intimacy and experience God in so many different ways, they kind of develop two different branches, or two different kind of logical approaches. I'm having a hard time thinking of the right way to put this. Modus operandi. The hardcore prophets are the ones whose experience with God is such that he's telling them stuff, and it's that kind of preventative nature, in the sense that they really want you to know the truth, because God has told them some realities about where you're going and what's going to happen, and it's a warning. And they really, really want you to heed that warning to protect yourself. So their heart is to protect you at all costs. The trouble is that, they might not be so gracious, shall we say, when you ignore them and have everything blow up in your face, and suddenly you didn't heed those warnings. And now you're dealing with the consequences of those warnings coming to fruition as they warned you they would. It happens. I know there's a kind of like a whole clade of prophets that just kind of like revolve around that. They can come across as being very harsh, very black and white. And then you have your shepherd prophets. These prophets have had experiences where what the part of God that they're experiencing is that of his heart, his compassion, his love. And that's not to say that the other ones don't have an experience with his love. It's just a different side of it, In these cases, with these kind of shepherd prophets, it's that part that it's that heart that wants to love, that wants to show compassion, that wants to just be there. And a lot of the time what they're getting is they're getting like words and impressions that are telling them things about the individual at hand. So they've got this person in front of them, and that person in front of them is like they're hearing things and seeing things in the spirit that God is telling them about that person, and they just fall in love with that person and wanting to take care of that person. Because they're experiencing God in this way, and at the same time they're experiencing this person on this intimate level, and they just want to take care of them. in those instances, in that way, prophets can kind of can at times fall into this kind of caretaker role, where they'll sit there and they'll have this person in front of them, and it is actually a very good blend of kind of like the teacher shepherd approach. They kind of skirt the line between those two, because they're trying to elevate that person the best that they can, and that's by like drawing them into greater intimacy with God, the same way that they have, similar to a teacher. However, there's also that part of the shepherd where they really want to like see personal growth, and they just live for it. They strive for that. So they're planting those seeds, and then they're watering those seeds with words that God gives them, and just watching for the growth. Now, admittedly, they're not as good at dealing with the tedium part, which is a big thing for shepherds. Shepherds tend to have an obscene amount of patience. And I say that despite my experiences. Because it's easy for those to be particularly loud. See, the thing about shepherds that tends to rob them of, just being who they are in this regard, is this kind of weird mentality. Like, it's this weird thing where they're trying to preserve themselves from being taken advantage of. So they overshoot it, and they create this kind of mentality of, okay, in order to protect myself, I need to keep a careful eye on these people who might take advantage of me. And in that place, they tend to not have as much patience, because they're so busy, they're so caught up in trying to protect themselves that they're not actually doing their thing. Like, they've taken all of those caretaking gifts that they have, and they've turned them inward. And now, as a result, they're being frustrated by the tediums, not only of the people who are so needy, but also their need to protect, and trying to just manage both of those things, their care and the other person's care, all at the same time. And that can get to be a lot to juggle at any point in time. So, but when they're not juggling that, they have so much patience. They have so much understanding. They have such an ability to understand and care for people. Like, for anybody who's had experiences with somebody who's like a shepherd by office, and I know for many that might be kind of an arcane thing to suggest thinking about, because this is kind of like a weird, you don't find a lot of churches preaching about spiritual offices. It's not a thing. And it's something that we went over in significant detail during our offices series. But, so I tend to be referring back to that a lot and so on. But, that tangent aside, what I was going to say is that we have a lot of, I'm losing it. It's lost. Oh well, it'll come back. Anyway, shepherds that are not like having to obsess about and be afraid of being taken advantage of, can be some of the most gentle and helpful people that you'll ever run into. And it's just, I mean, like the level of care that they'll provide for you. You know, thinking of like your favorite foods, or, you know, your birthday, or just remembering things about you and liking you and taking care of you in so many fascinating ways. I can think of one shepherd in Heather and I's life who, she has this gift to just like know things that we want. We had Heather mentioned wanting Butterfingers obscurely. Just she was just talking to me about her wish to have like some Butterfingers. Sure enough, this woman shows up with like 3 bags of Butterfingers for us. We didn't talk to her about it. We didn't say anything. She was just at the store and thought, oh, these are cheap. Oh, maybe Heather and Nathan would like some of these.
They are pretty much God's like vessels, you know, that send out to tell people that He knows you. He knows you. He knows you.
Right. Just in case that didn't get picked up on the mic, I'll say that again for her. They're pretty much like God's vessels to show you that He hears you and that He does care. And He knows you.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. And like I talked about during the Office series, you know, shepherds make the house a home. Good shepherds will keep you warm and fed and clothed and everything under the sun. Because that's what they do. And that's the part of God that they represent. They represent that heart that takes care of you, grows you, builds you. The same is true with teachers in a different way. They represent that part of God's heart where they're going to teach you and organize you and structure you and build you piece by piece as a person. Now, it's really important for us to, you know, see and appreciate that. Like I was saying earlier on, you know, as a result of the church's kind of like idioms of, you know, everybody needs to be doing these things, we can lose focus of the fact that some of us do this very, very well. And it can cause us to start lacking appreciation for those who have these offices. And it's a really important thing that we don't, because the reality is that these 2 offices, and to lesser, and those prophets who do it too, those shepherd prophets, they're taking responsibility for the care and maintenance of human beings. And that's obscenely important. It doesn't matter if you're in church or some other community or just in any other place in life. That is extremely important because we all need to be taken care of. Just because we grow up doesn't mean that we cease to need other people in our lives to help us. That, my friends, is bullshit. We live in societies because we need other people. We live in communities because we need other people. And when you see those people who go completely lone wolf, those are broken, hurt, bitter people. There's nothing good about that. Oh, they're taking care of themselves. Yeah, how are they doing, by the way? I bet their psychology's great. What's their emotional state like? Bitter and full of rage? I bet. Yeah. I bet that's healthy, right? They die young.
I was thinking about doing that for myself.
It's just this thing where we're built for community. We're built for eh, other people. I mean, you can fight about it all you want, but it's in our blasted biology. The only There aren't very many creatures that have a bigger in their brains a bigger center for communal living. I believe it's cetaceans, so whales and dolphins are some of the only creatures whose brains are more developed for community than ours. That's saying a lot, guys. Like, there are lots of animals in the world, and that puts us in a very specific position. So the idea that in community we're not going to need people to come around us and take care of us, because community in and of itself represents a lot of issues. So you take a big group of people. You know what? Forget it. Let's take a small group of. Forget that. Let's just use real examples. This whole COVID-19 thing. I see all the fights that happen. I mean, damn, guys, damn.
Try to forget that.
So I'm watching everybody in this community like fight with each other about different issues that maybe you guys don't even have the capacity to change. For what? That's a lot of unnecessary drama and conflict. Because you have differing opinions, but you can't just talk about it and agree to disagree. You have to fight about it and then get angry at each other and have these elaborate debates that don't achieve anything aside from pissing each other off and creating stigmas between each other that say, no, I don't like you anymore because you disagreed with me. And then you come up with a bunch of suppositions about your varied characters. Okay. And the problem with this whole thing is that we now have these very strong opinions in these fights that are happening, and that tends to be destructive both to individuals and to community as a whole. And as a result, it makes community feel burdensome. It makes the individuals feel pain and rejection and doubt and concern. So, in the face of all those things, we need people who can help, like, fill in those, like, they can help glue those broken pieces back together. And that's very much so what we see with these kinds of caretakers. Shepherds that are willing to step forward and do their thing and be who they are. If we're talking, in Christmas land here about shepherds who are unapologetically shepherds and teachers who are unapologetically teachers, they're the types that will come around these kinds of situations and really put in the work to help fill in these cracks and bring this whole kind of fractured thing back together. And that's not to say that other people don't have a place in that, or that other offices are not capable. Sure, apostles can have their part, and prophets are great for this too. And evangelists, they gather people. It's what they do. I mean, it's fun. But the big thing here is that it's like, when we have those caretakers, they're the ones who are going, your shepherds are the ones who are going to sit down and just let you vent for an hour about what people did to you, and then tell you that it's okay afterwards, and support your growth and your development. They might even give you some really good advice about, how to approach this conflict, and, how to like really address your personal feelings and what it takes for you to grow past this. And your teachers are going to be able to like take you on and really help you understand like why people are the way they are, and the dynamic of it, to the best of their abilities. And even they may even be able to give you advice in terms of what they would do in this very practical sense and organized sense. It's something that's a beautiful and necessary thing in the church as a whole, in community as a whole. So it's something that we need, and it's a place for us to be met by these people who do want to take care of us. We need that because we're not always good at doing it ourselves. In fact, we're often bad at it. But that's not to say that they don't need us too. One of the things for this whole particular series and this series of messages that are coming out here, even though we're talking about a conceptual aspect that's maintained by, one or two offices at a time, it's also the fact that we're all in this together. Kind of a pitfall that shepherds run into when it comes to the whole caretaking thing is that they can, like I mentioned earlier, is that I mentioned it with evangelists. Shepherds can have a rather fluid relationship with the truth, and it can become the kind of thing where they focus on what works more than what's right. And a lot of the time that comes at a cost to them more than anybody else. I talked about it last week, but the way that they'll like let their values or let their boundaries be crossed, and then they'll feel really bad about it, but they justify it based on the fact that like the other person's getting better, or they hope they're getting better, and then if they're not, they just feel even worse. Shepherds have a tendency to do that where they're not very good at maintaining their own boundaries or even caring about their boundaries. Again, like I said last week, it's because they prioritize others above themselves. And, it's kind of how they're built. They're built to be focused on those around them. However, it is important for them to be able to learn to move into a more balanced place. That's a great place for teachers to come in and help kind of like develop a structure for them to help them develop boundaries that are healthy, as opposed to like their tendency to, I believe in the Office series of yore, I referred to this as they have a tendency to overdo it on the boundaries, because they're not good at making them on their own. When they try to make them, they tend to like go way beyond what's necessary or healthy, and can at times actually create a more destructive situation. So, teachers are great for that. Prophets just listening to God and sharing what they feel and hear. They can oftentimes bring a lot of light to what shepherds need, and to help them really see. Evangelists and apostles are the two most conflict-oriented offices, like I talked about last week. Conflict is comfortable. Most apostles and evangelists don't even think twice about the fact that, this is a fight. Whereas a shepherd might have a really hard time with that. These guys are just like, yeah, we're fighting now. Okay. Ready. They're not even mad.
Yeah, they're over it before they can start.
the other guy's been screaming at them for 4 hours. They're typing in all caps at this point on social media, and they're just like, oh, I think they're mad. Huh. I didn't mean to make you angry. I'm fine though. Who better to help you with conflict than somebody that doesn't take it personally?
Yay.
It's just part of their story. And we need that. Like, shepherds need that. You need to not always have to like take things personally. You need to have the opportunity to learn comfortable boundaries, to see that things aren't as serious as you might think they are, because a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, like a lot of shepherds, they can tend to get caught up in that mindset of like they're afraid they're going to lose the relationship if they develop boundaries, or if they or if they give into the conflict. When in reality, you've got these apostles who are building whole communities and they're fighting with everybody at the same time. Yet it works, or at least it's continuing on. Obviously, conflict is not the ultimate destroyer of relationships, and it helps to be able to learn that from those who are comfortable in that place. And that's for our own health. We need our shepherds to be healthy. It's like a doctor who gets sick, you know, or a doctor who's overwhelming themselves with work. Doctors need to take a rest too. In that same token, shepherds need to be taken care of too. And then with teachers, there's a place for them to learn as well. See, teachers, I feel like I haven't really talked about them as much as maybe it would be important to. But it's also just a different dynamic. For teachers, since it's more of like more of a mentoring thing, oftentimes what they find themselves needing is, number one, to kind of like reorganize, like restructure how they approach things. Because see, the natural inclination of a teacher is to teach what they know, and to develop those who are under them, who they've kind of taken under their wing, to develop them in their own image. Now that can be really great in some ways, but it can also be really bad in other ways. Jesus puts it really well when he says a student can only become as good as their teacher. And that's an important thing for teachers to remember, is that their limitations will be the limitations that those that they're raising up run into. Like, if you don't have an answer for something, or you have a bad answer that you've made up because your pride stopped you from like just being honest about not knowing, whoever you're teaching that to is going to run into the same problems as you, and they're going to have that limitation too, or they're going to have that bad answer, and that's probably going to cause problems later on in life, or immediately in life when they try to apply it to the whatever problem. It's okay to say you don't know. And that's actually a really big deal for teachers in general. And sometimes they need the body to help them remember that. The other thing is to help them remember that, this isn't about them. See, there's a difference between mentorship and discipleship. And in a lot of ways, we're called to make disciples, and sometimes teachers can have a hard time making that distinction. And that's where they really need the rest of the body, because that's a blind spot for them. They don't always know that what they're preaching is purely their opinion. Like, they believe it. They believe that this is something that they've drawn this from their their deep inspections into the scriptures, or what they've been able to kind of perceive through the teachings of others, or something to that extent. They don't understand that maybe this isn't true. Maybe they just really liked the idea, and it was really fascinating.
Or that opinions don't exist. Instead, it's about right and wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the right thing to do. This is the wrong thing to do, and it's not that cut and dry.
Yeah. So where they need the rest of the body is that sometimes they need help seeing that. I mean, like, the limitation thing, knowing that it's okay to say I don't know. That can be another place where, they need a shepherd to come alongside them and tell them, hey, I'm here for you no matter what. You don't have to prove yourself. Or an apostle or a prophet or an evangelist, any of them just be able to come up and say, hey man, it's okay. Like, we don't all know everything. That's why we work together. But this blind spot about, mentorship and discipleship, sometimes they need those other people to come around them and really help them fill in those blanks. One, to help them elevate above like their present station. That's a really important thing for teachers, to not get caught up in their personal knowledge, and instead always be open to greater learning. I mean, you already are built the way you are, which is as people who are just, they crave new understanding and new knowledge, because it helps bring more order and more understanding to life. So continue to be hungry and thirsty, and as a result, when you've got these other people around you sharing their different perspectives and so on, absorb that and let that flow from you. And never let yourself become arrogant or boastful or proud of the knowledge that you have ascertained. But also, when be open to correction. See, it's the kind of thing that will help you. It's the kind of thing that helps a teacher continue to grow, continue to develop, continue to become more. And as a result, those underneath them who are being raised with them, who they're raising to their level, if your level keeps raising, they keep going with you. And that's a beautiful thing when we're all on the same climb, trying to make it through this life, this difficult and problematic life. The more that we learn from each other and grow with each other, the better. Be open to being wrong about, the best way to handle people, because the evangelist knows it best. They're the best at, kind of getting people to care. Coming with some
Or be
like,
okay with being human.
or that,
It's a big deal.
yeah. With a, know that it's okay to just be a mess sometimes. Shepherds will sit there with you. If you have other teachers around, they'll help organize your mess. If you have apostles with you, they'll help draw you back into the community and remember that you're fine. It's okay.
They'll remind you of your vision.
Yeah. And prophets will help you see the mess so much. Because they're just going to get stuff from God, and they're going to be able to help direct you back. There's such a place for us to be able to really rely on each other and our respective giftings that come from just being different people. and the way that we're built, we're all representing some part of God's heart here. And as a result, there's something for all of us to come together and mesh into like one thing. And that one thing can be very powerful at one time. Oh, and I don't want to leave out the prophets, the shepherd prophets in this particular category, because that's also a thing. They need God just as much. Even though, like I mentioned earlier, how they kind of toe the line between the two, that works both ways, because that's not only in the sense of the good stuff, where, like, they're offering the like deep care for a person, but also the bringing them along for the ride kind of deal. That also comes with the issue of boundaries and thinking they know everything. Like, and I say this knowing a lot of shepherd prophets. Prophets in general have the pitfall of falling into the thing of believing that they know all the truth. And we'll talk more about that, because next week's message is all about truth telling. So we'll be revisiting a couple offices here. And we'll be talking a little bit more in depth about prophets as well. But one of the things is that they can become very black and white in their view of the truth. And they think that they have the answers. This is actually why teachers and prophets can really, like, conflict with each other a lot in your general, like, talk discussion about offices and so on. But that's not really our focus here. But because they're hearing from God directly, they can get stuck in the mindset that as a result of their hearing, they know it's best. Like, they lose sight sometimes of the risk that they might misinterpret a word or something like that, and just get stuck in the mentality of, I'm always right. God tells me stuff. I'm always right in what I'm hearing. You should be paying attention to me.
Yeah, they're kind of like used to carrying like that one role, so they can forget about what their needs are.
Yeah.
Just like a teacher needs to remember to be a learner.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. A prophet needs to learn to be prophesied to and have wisdom offered to them, and not just to rely on themselves.
Yeah. And then what's more is when you add in the boundary struggle that comes from, like, the shepherd side, you've got somebody who believes that they're always right, and they're impeding their own boundaries to take care of other people in ways that oftentimes may actually be, like, deeply contradictory to the teachings of Christ. So it's this kind of uncomfortable thing that you run into where you're just like, yeah, but that's objectively wrong. No, it's not, because God said it was okay. Did he? I feel like he didn't say it was okay. What exactly did he say? Well, he said I could do it if I wanted to. Okay, that doesn't mean it's okay, man. That means that you have a choice to make. No, he said it this way. I know he said it that way. He didn't say specifically, it's okay for you to do this.
Your name's not spelled Christ.
I have actually had that line of conversation with another person before. Actually, it's many times, come to think of it, with different people. It's a thing that happens. Like, it's a place where we all need to be more humble in our approach, and we need each other. And there's a very important place for us to be vulnerable with each other and know that we can be vulnerable. And there's no better time to talk about that than when we're talking about the caretakers. Like I said earlier, those old Christian idioms of like we're all pastors to each other. Even though they run the risk of devaluing those who do take care of other people. And even though they run the risk of kind of normalizing this thing instead of making it and making us putting us in a place where we're not going to celebrate it so much. It's still really important to recognize what this is and to know that, like, you know, it's a good and noble thing. It's something to be honored when we're taking care of each other and when we're doing a good job of that. If Jeremy does a good job of like talking to somebody and taking care of them when they're in a time of need, he needs to know that he did a good job. And we need to be humble enough with each other to be able to create an atmosphere that allows us to be open to one another. And that's going to require trust and vulnerability. A place where we all know that we're going to try to take care of each other is a great place to have trust and vulnerability. If we can all recognize that our hearts are really there for each other, then we can also recognize that we don't need to be so guarded. And that's extremely important in the church. Like, I cannot stress that enough. Especially when you've got a church with some pretentious name like Refuge.
I never thought of it as pretentious.
I'm tired. Anyway, my point is that, like, we have a mission statement in our own name here. I mean, it's there.
Yeah, Todd Bentley.
Stop it. It's not Nathan Jacquard Ministries or Heather and Nathan's Fun House of Jesus. It's Refuge, because
Why
this.
is it suddenly a fun house when I'm part of it? Is that a compliment, please?
You're really pretty. Anyway,
What else do you notice?
like I was saying, it's Refuge. It's in our own name. This is a church where people are meant to be able to come and be taken care of. And that requires opportunities to be vulnerable. No one's going to come in and, share like the horrible things that they've done or confess like the things that they need if they don't feel comfortable doing it. And there's a place where we need more room for that. We need more people who are caretakers and less people who are judges. And that's just a reality that we all need to face and determine, who we're going to be. And at every turn, when we look at Christ and look at what he was about and what he talks about, yeah, he says, judge correctly. But what does that mean? In the context, he was saying, pay attention to what's around you. And at no point in time when God spent so much time, so many words in Isaiah and other books of the prophets saying, take care of the widows and orphans. And then when Jesus turned around and reiterated that again, apparently it's a big deal. It's a really big deal to him, the whole caretaking thing. Because it's part of his heart. So, It's a thing for us. It's a very important, very big thing for us. And it's a big thing for these people. There's a place for us to celebrate our shepherds and our teachers and our shepherd prophets. It's a thing for us to also help them be who they are and be strong where they are. Because us strengthening them allows them to strengthen us in such significant ways. And that's what I got.